Terroir. I'm Simon Jacob, your host for this episode from Jerusalem. Before we get started, I ask that wherever you are, please take a moment and pray for the safety of our soldiers and the safe return of all of our hostages. Today we uncork one of the most fascinating journeys in the world of wine. My guest is Jeff Morgan, a man whose life reads like a vintage novel. Jazz saxophonist in the south of France, wine editor for The Wine Spectator, author of books that helped redefine rosé, and finally, the co-founder of Covenant Winery, a label that redefined what kosher wine can be. Jeff didn't set out to make kosher wine. In fact, he didn't even grow up religious. But what started as a tasting of Napa Cabernet shared with a late friend and visionary Leslie Rudd became a mission to prove that kosher wine could stand tall among the world's finest. Whether you're a longtime fan of Jeff's work or just discovering the soulful side of kosher wine, this is one episode you don't want to miss. If you're driving in your car, please focus on the road ahead. If you're home, please pour yourself a glass of wonderful kosher wine and let's dive into the music, meaning, and mastery behind Covenant wines. Welcome to the Kosher Terroir.
Wait, aren't you even going to introduce me?
No.
Okay.
Welcome, Jeff Morgan from Covenant. And it's a pleasure to have you in Israel. Welcome home. Okay?
Thank you, Simon. It's a pleasure to be back in Israel.
Yes.
I've been gone too long.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to let that happen again.
Okay. Please God. There's wars, there's plagues, things like that. Some of the things are out of your control.
Yeah.
But, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
now I'm just going to have to fly El Al because it's the only airline I can count on.
Yeah.
Not to cancel my flight.
100%. I know. So does he.
But they've, El Al, to their credit, they've improved things because the last time I flew El Al, I said, I'll never fly that airline again. But that was about 10 years ago. It was great.
They have great flights, great service.
Yeah.
And if you're in business class, you get like 7 wines that you can select from. You had 2.
I had Chilo Chenin Blanc, which was quite good.
The Chenin is good.
Yeah. And then we had a Vitkin Pinot Noir that was excellent. And then I had a couple of scotches, a couple of movies, a couple of sleeping pills, and I'm telling you, that was the greatest flight.
I always say if the flight's not good, you haven't drunk enough. All right.
All right.
You started your career as a saxophonist touring Europe. How did that artistic path shape your journey into wine?
That's a great question.
Is it?
Yeah. So here I was, a nice Jewish boy with no religious training whatsoever, no education. And I moved to France at the age of 19 to study music at the French National Conservatory. And I went for lunch, first day of school, and they had a canteen where you could go for 50 cents, get 50 cents. It was government subsidized lunch. And it was Friday, so it happened to be fish, because it was a Catholic country. In those days, it was fish. So I went, there were all these beautiful salads. I took a salad, and I went, the fish was the fish with the head on the fish, everything, a whole fish they gave you. Remember, this is 50 cents. But then after the fish, there was a cheese course, then there was dessert, and then there was somebody at the line who I barely understood, because my French wasn't very good, and he said, Monsieur, oh, that's me, red or white? It'll cost an extra franc, an extra 25 cents. And I'm thinking, red or white what? And then I realized I saw these little splits of red and white wine. And I decided to splurge. I took the white. And if you've ever heard of Dom Perignon and the champagne Dom Perignon, Dom Perignon, he tried for years to get the bottles to stay in the bottle without exploding the bottles. When he finally succeeded and he made his first successful champagne, And he popped the cork and he said, I am seeing stars. I had that same experience with one sip of that white wine, one bite of my little fish, once somebody showed me how to eat it, and I saw stars, and I realized I'd been eating and drinking badly all my life with my mom, God bless her, rest her soul, who made spaghetti with ketchup and other specialties of the house that were not particularly good. We had to drink the milk with that, as a matter of fact, as I recall. So it was an epiphany for me, a culinary epiphany that I did not realize would take me closer to God and Judaism.
Wow.
So fast forward, I spent the next 5 years in France learning how to play better music and also learning how to eat better and drink better. And ultimately, I became the band leader for the Prince Rainier of Monaco, and I lived in France for quite a few years. And and one night, I realized that I was more interested in what I was drinking than what I was playing, even though I had this great band, I was making a lot of money, and I decided to become a winemaker. And that brought me back to New York because nobody in France would hire an American saxophone player to be a winemaker. I didn't know anything about making wine; I just loved to drink it. And I got a job at a little winery in Long Island, New York. Worked there for a few years, learning how to make wine.
North Coast?
The North Fork.
North Fork?
And after a while, I was making so little money at the winery that I went back to being a full-time musician, but I started writing about wine. And I got a call, and I got into the New York Times as a writer. The miracles happen, Jews, miracles. That's our trademark. And then the editor of the Wine Spectator magazine saw my byline in the New York Times. I had a story on Long Island wines, and he called me and he said, Jeff Morgan, are you the Jeff Morgan that was making wine in Long Island, that we liked your wines that you were making recently? And I said, yeah. And they said, well, we didn't know you were also a wine writer. And I said, well, yeah, now I am. I'm a wine writer now, and I was getting very excited because the Wine Spectator, my dream, dream was to write for the Wine Spectator. And they said, we have a story for you. And I said, what is it? This was in January of 1992. They said, we'd like you to write about kosher wine for Passover. And I said, that was a little my reaction. I started laughing. I said, what?
Comes back to bite you.
I said, is this a joke? And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, I never had a good kosher wine. I haven't had very many, and I don't even know anything about kosher wine. And they said, the editor, a guy named Tom Matthews, he says, but you're Jewish, right? 33 years ago, they could say things like, you're Jewish. I said, yeah, I'm Jewish, but like no bar mitzvah, no nothing. I don't know anything about this. They said, it's okay, you just write what you want. Last year we had a non-Jew write the story, and we were accused of being anti-Semitic. So this year, you're our ace in the hole. Say what you like, and we're safe. It's your foot in the door, Morgan. You want to write for the Wine Spectator, take it or leave it. So I took it.
Yeah.
Took it. And and I was completely lost. I didn't even know where to begin, but I knew that there was some company that sold a lot of kosher wine, and it was called Royal Wines.
Yep.
And I picked up the phone, and I called them, and I didn't even know who to call. And I said, my name is Jeff Morgan. I'm Jewish. Doesn't sound Jewish, but I'm Jewish.
Yep.
I'm doing a story for the Wine Spectator. And they said, oh, let me pass you to Nathan Herzog. I didn't know who Nathan Herzog was. We now know that he is one of the biggest machers at the Royal Wine Corporation. So he says, well, this is great, but let me pass you to our educator. Somebody you know. Mr. J. Buxbaum.
Yep.
He will tell you everything you need to know and more about kosher wine.
Right.
And that was really the beginning of my whole thing. Kind of crazy. I never imagined that 10 years later I would be making a wine that has become one of the premier kosher wines in the world, Covenant. Right. But I had no idea at that time.
So that's actually a question that I have. When you're working on the West Coast for the Wine Spectator, you probably tasted thousands of wines, okay?
No, every year I tasted thousands of wines.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
But I wasn't, at that time I was still in New York, on Long Island.
Okay, all right.
They moved me in 1995 to the West Coast, but my job for the first 3 years was to travel around the world, especially to France, to taste French wines and write stories about French culture, because I was one of the few guys who spoke fluent French. So they took advantage of that, and I was happy to go back to France. But what's the question?
No, so the question is, what pivotal experience made you decide that you want to make your own wines?
Well, I actually, before I got that job at The Spectator, I was working in a winery in Long Island. So I was making not my wines, but I was a cellar rat in a vineyard, and I worked in a vineyard also. So that was a very seminal time for me to learn about winemaking and grape growing. And then when I moved to California, I lasted another 5 years, so 8 years totally with The Wine Spectator. And one day I was getting really bored of writing. Journalists start recycling their articles. I mean, kind of. You plagiarize yourself, even if it's not intentional.
It's hard not to.
After a while, you do. How many winemakers can you interview? You're probably starting to experience this right now, Simon, with your podcast.
Yes.
And it's like, well, I'm really bored. I'm frustrated. I don't want anybody to tell me what to write anymore. And I'm going to I'm going to get out of here and move up to Napa. I was living in San Francisco, so I'm moving to Napa, and maybe I'll get a job. I got a job as the wine director for Dean & DeLuca, which at the time had a headquarters in Napa, and started making a rosé called Solo Rosa, which was made from bleed. I don't know if everybody listening to this knows what bleed is, but it was pink juice that nobody wanted, and I was putting it in barrels and fermenting it. I was making only rosé, Solo Rosa, and I was one of the guys who started the rosé revolution. If we're drinking Oda Mountain right now, pink wine, it's because Solo Rosa, which was not kosher, and it was not from Israel. It was my California rosé that helped change the world of pink wine. And I can say that because then I wrote a book about it. And then the French government actually came and invited me to come to France and tell them how to get Americans to buy and drink more rosé.
So the question, I was going to say, your book on rosé was one of the earliest to treat the category with serious respect.
Yeah.
Why rosé, and why then?
Well, remember, I was living in Nice, France, where rosé is king. So I was drinking a lot of rosé is king in Provence. Nice is in Provence. So I was drinking a lot of rosé, and I knew it was good. And then I knew it. I don't know. I just figured nobody else is doing that, so I'm going to do it. So first I tried, I was the king of rosé, then I was the king of kosher. It's like my father was called Hardway Morgan, and I think his son has inherited that moniker.
I'll do it. Because I was going to say, at that point in time, well, the question I have is, has public perception of rosé finally caught up with what you saw back then?
Well, yeah, not only to catch up, it overwhelmed me. I mean, when I started, nobody was doing this. And then all of a sudden, people realized, wait, maybe this is something we can make money at. And I started an organization called RAP, the Rosé Avengers and Producers. We had pink outs on the East Coast, on the West Coast. And
I love it.
And we did all sorts of fun stuff. And we started with 10 members, and then within several years, we had 250 members. And everybody, I sound a little full of myself because I say when you're a visionary, the good news is you're the first one with the idea. But then once it catches on, then you're overcome by all the people who come after you, especially those with deeper pockets. And we just couldn't keep up with demand, and we couldn't compete with all of the brands that came out. By 2008, Solo Rosa was over. However, in 2002, I was up in Napa. We had a Jewish tasting group. None of us were particularly religious, but we were all Jews, making some of the most famous wines in Napa, like Silver Oak and Harlan, all Jewish winemakers. And we had a little tasting group, and we heard that a guy named Eli Ben Zaken from Domaine du Castel was visiting Napa Valley. We invited him to come to do a tasting, and he brought his, I believe it was his 1999 Castel Grand Vin, for us to taste, and it was absolutely delicious. And two of us there, myself and my late partner Leslie Rudd, who had a very famous vineyard in Napa, Rudd Vineyard, we looked at each other and we thought, gee, maybe we could make a great Napa Valley Cabernet like this, and like as good as Castel. And that was the beginning of Covenant. It was kind of on a lark. And the odd thing is that wine wasn't kosher. The first vintage of Castel Kosher was 2002.
Yeah, 2002 was half a year. Yeah. And 2003 was the first full year.
Well, 2002 we're tasting is 1999, which was fully not kosher. But we were so clueless. We thought it was kosher because it was from Israel.
It's Israel.
Jews, Israel.
Yeah.
So it's ironic that my entire kosher program and my relatively newly found connection to Israel came from a wine that I thought was kosher from Israel that wasn't kosher. And Ellie knows this, and I think we both get a chuckle out of it when I bring it up.
So I'm told, and I'm not positive that it's factual, that Covenant was born in 2003 from a single barrel of Napa Cabernet.
False.
What?
False.
False. See?
Yeah, who told you that?
I don't know. That was the story that I heard.
No. What happened was I wanted to use Leslie's grapes because he had this very famous vineyard, fantastic Cabernet. And I said, so let's start with your grapes, Les, because Les was a very wealthy man and he had this kind of an empire. He said, are you kidding? What if you screw it up? It's going to be the worst kosher wine in 5,000 years from Rudd Vineyard. And I said, well, what do you want to do? He said, you find another vineyard, we'll buy those grapes, and we'll start with that and see how you do. So that other vineyard was a very famous vineyard called Larkmead, which for several years prior to 2003, had gone into the Rudd wines because Rudd had been replanting his vines, and so he had been using the Larkmead grapes, and the winemaker at Rudd at the time was a guy named David Ramey, who's a very close friend of mine and a great winemaker. And Dave told me that Larkmead was going to need to sell those grapes because Rudd was no longer buying them. So I did a deal with the Larkmead, the owners of Larkmead, and that deal lasted, I think, for 10 years. I sourced grapes from their vineyard, from a single block there, so it wasn't a single barrel, it was a single parcel.
It was a single parcel.
And it happens to be, when I finally bailed on that parcel, only because I hated the owner and I didn't want to deal with him anymore, it's fantastic grapes, they started using my parcel for their top-of-the-line wine. So anyway, but we were very fortunate to start with some terrific grapes. So we started, I think we made, actually I know exactly what we did. We did 14 tons the first year. 14 tons is a lot more than one barrel.
Yes.
It was, you get, I don't know, maybe you get about 2 barrels per ton. So, it's about 28 to 30 barrels.
Right.
And I needed Shomer Shabbat hands. There were none at the time in Napa, so I had a meeting with Nathan Herzog of Royal Wine Corporation prior to the harvest. In fact, prior to starting the project, and I said, Nathan, I have this idea. I want to make the greatest kosher wine in 5,000 years. And we were having a dinner in a restaurant in New York, and I told him this, and then I burst into tears, crying, really sobbing. And it surprised me. It surprised Nathan. And he goes like, what are you, Meshuggah? What's the problem, Jeff? And I said, I don't know, Nathan, I wasn't expecting to start crying. I was trying to get you to let me use your winery to make my kosher wine. He said, well, you can do that as long as you let me be your distributor in New York and New Jersey. And I said, great. But I think in retrospect, we look back and we know that that was the beginning, the door opening to Jeff Morgan and his family to Judaism, which I hadn't really thought much about up until that moment.
Wow.
It was kind of all on a dare that this started, really. It was kind of, I don't think you can do it, And I knew you could do it because I knew from I wrote about wine, kosher wine for The Spectator for 8 years. Every year I had to write that kosher wine for Passover. So I knew you just make kosher wine like regular wine. You just don't work on Shabbat and other holy days, and you got to have Shomer Shabbat hands. But I've made Covenant the way I made any other non-kosher wines. So I knew we could do it, and we did.
So Covenant set out to elevate kosher wine to kind of world-class standards, I believe. What was the initial reaction from the kosher and non-kosher worlds?
So, it's in retrospect, okay, we set out to elevate kosher wine. I think that is a bit pretentious.
Chutzpah. A little bit of chutzpah.
That wasn't really. No. We just wanted to make a great kosher wine from Napa. And I think it was more about respect. You know, like, okay, I've been writing about kosher wines. Everybody denigrated them. A lot of them were not so good, but there were some really good ones too. I knew this after all those years of writing about kosher. So it was more of a quest for parity, so to speak. I mean, by that time, I spent 20 years tasting the greatest wines in the world, from Chateau Petrus to DRC. I've tasted the greatest not kosher wines made anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. And my goal was to make wines, that approach that kind of quality and keep it kosher. That was the goal. And I think we've been successful, because we don't succeed every vintage to the same level, but some of our wines are as good as the greatest wines I've ever had. And if we don't get 100 points from various pundits, it's only because anti-Semitism is still rife in even among Jewish wine writers. Nobody can believe it. So they give us 96, they give us 95, they give us 94. But God forbid they should give us the 100 points we deserve for a 100-point wine. And they don't yet. And maybe they never will. But it's okay.
So going back to your comment that you didn't grow up religious, but kosher winemaking became a major part of your life. What prompted that personal and professional shift?
Well, it was kind of that story I said, the tasting with Castel.
Yep.
Is right there with, it's like, Ellie was there. He didn't know it, but I kind of, we were talking to, I'm kind of doing sotto voce to Leslie Rudd. I'm going, do you think we can make something that's good, keep it kosher out of Napa? And it was kind of like, well, yeah, let's try to do that. And I really wanted to make Cabernet, Napa Valley Cabernet, not kosher, just any Napa Valley Cabernet. I was living in there, and Napa Cabernet is the most famous of all their varietals, and I didn't have any money. Couldn't get started. And Les had the money, and he only wanted to do it with me if we kept it kosher. So we argued for a full year. From 2022 to 2023, we argued about this. And I said, I really don't want to make kosher. And he said, yeah, we can do this. And I thought, okay, we're going to do it. And so that was the pivotal. It was kind of like the only way I could get started was to keep it kosher. Oh, no, I wasn't religious at all. I'd never gone to synagogue in my life. In fact, I didn't join a synagogue until I was 60.
Was that Castel wine really good?
Yeah. It was good enough to inspire us to try to make something equally good from Napa. Wow. I've had some phenomenally good Castel over the years.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Absolutely.
I had at my daughter's wedding recently, I had a Magnum of 2003 cab, and it was just great. It was just wonderful.
Yeah. And I think Castel maybe has possibly the most beautiful winery in Israel also. I'm terribly jealous. Also, what can I say? I want that winery.
I know. You could eat off the barrel room floor. It's crazy. I love it.
Yeah. So that's how it all happened. It was kind of certainly not planned. And then what happened is I was bringing my wines, driving my grapes down in a big truck to Herzog's winery down in Southern California, and working with his very dedicated team of cellar guys who were Shomer Shabbat, and there were two rules. One rule was I can't touch the wine. The other rule was they couldn't touch the wine unless I'm there. So because I want to make sure they do it my way and not whatever other way they might do it. So I spent a lot of time with them and during harvest, and I watched them do things I'd never heard of. Something called Mincha, something called Marav, something called Tehillim. They were reading. I don't know, all this stuff, and I realized I really don't know anything about what it means to be Jewish. I knew nothing, and that was, I guess, the first year I realized that maybe I should learn something. I didn't know the Covenant was going to be so well known, but I had a feeling that if I was going to become a kosher winemaker, I better know something about Judaism. So I started learning.
I was going to ask, how did the Jewish tradition evolve along with your wine journey?
I think it was really inspired by the guys in the cellar at Herzog Wine Cellars originally. Wow. You know, I mean, Jonathan Haydu was there, and the Weiss brothers were there, and
wow.
You know, all these guys, and a guy named Josh Goodman was there. Okay. Josh is fantastic. We're still working for Royal, but he's not in the cellar there. All these guys really were inspirations to me when it comes to getting more connected to Jewish tradition, and I'm very grateful for that. Nathan Herzog, very, very instrumental in keeping me connected as well.
Have you found that you've got an increasing number of non-kosher wine consumers buying Covenant? I don't know how you know that.
I'd like to think we do, but you know, we don't. When we sell a bottle of wine, we don't ask, are you Jewish? Not Jewish. We can't. So we have no idea. I suspect
that's true.
That, you know, maybe 80% of our customers are, or more, are observant. I think non-observant Jews might dispute this, but they're our worst customers because they can't believe kosher. They're the only ones who really don't believe kosher can be good are the guys, or the secular Jews who will spend $1,000, $2,000 on a bottle of Petrus, but God forbid they should pay $200 for a bottle of Covenant. There's no way it could be that good. But they don't know. They're clueless. Whereas, you know, we're on the wine list at super famous restaurants like the French Laundry. They have, I just bought a case of our Syrah from the Biennacido Vineyard, and there are plenty of famous non-kosher restaurants. We're by the glass at some super famous restaurants in San Francisco. So it's nobody knows that the wine's kosher in those restaurants. It's not marked. There's no billboards that's, you know, flashing kosher. So I think people drink our wine. They don't know, which is fine with me.
Covenant once had a thriving Israeli wine operation. Looking back, what did that chapter mean to you and the winery?
Whoa, that's a big question.
I know.
So why did we come to Israel? In 2011, Leslie Rudd, my late partner, and I, we had become, thanks to people like Robert Parker, who wrote The Covenant's the greatest kosher wine on planet Earth, we became pretty famous, at least pretty well known in secular and religious circles. Actually, more in the secular world, because the religious people don't even read Robert Parker, because he's really 99% of the wines reviewed by Robert Parker were not kosher. So, but we became pretty well known, and I don't know, around 2010, 2011, Les and I said, gee, you know, maybe we should go to Israel. Maybe we should see what's going on over there. I came to Israel for a month when I was 19. On my way to France, I stopped in Israel. It was 1973. I got out just before the war broke out, not knowing there was going to be a war. And Les hadn't been back for 20, 30 years either. So we came to Israel. I have family here, saw my family, and looked around, went up to the Golan, went up to Galil, particularly in the Galil where there's a lot of red soils and a lot of limestone. And I was thinking, wow, this looks like the Rhone Valley, and it looks like parts of Napa. I mean, this is a great place to grow grapes. And of course it's a great place to grow grapes because this is where it started. I mean, here and in other areas right around here, thousands of years ago. And so then I thought, in my mind, you know, why are we not making wine here? We're Jews. I mean, sure, we're Americans. We live in California, but this is really our homeland. Right? We should make wine here. So we started here in 2013 with my dear friend, the winemaker Ari Earl, who's still here. He makes wine for Bat Shlomo and some other wineries. And
we just had a rosé by him last night.
Makes a nice Debuki also. Yeah. And I think that might be his own label.
Yeah, it was his own label.
And anyway, so Ari had been living in Napa, and we knew each other from Napa Valley, so I knew he was here, and so we hooked up. I said, look, you want to make wine with me here? I got to make wine here. So we started, in Israel, we started with 3 barrels in 2013, which we made at Bat Shlomo, not at Bat Shlomo, we made it at Jezreel, because Ari was their winemaker at the time also. And I made the first couple of vintages at Jezreel, and then I moved up to Adir, up in the Galil, where they had more space because we were growing. And I was sourcing grapes from different vineyards, most notably at Sivon, which is a biodynamic vineyard not far from the Dalton, wine groups.
Yeah.
It's near the just north of the town of Gish, and our blocks were bombed in the last year.
Yeah.
But in any case, so I thought, well, I make wine in California, I can make wine here, and we did. We made wine using my methods. I was going back and forth. I was here, believe it or not, I was here like 4 months a year, but 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time. Then back to California. It was kind of exhausting, but it was very exciting. And of course, getting to know Israel from a viticultural perspective as well as a cultural perspective was for me very exciting. We became Israeli citizens 3 or 4 years ago, as Jody did. My daughter Zoe was living here. She'd gone to the University of Haifa and eventually married her Israeli boyfriend, and Zoe worked with us as long as we were operating here, and now she's working with us in our California winery. And it was just awesome. And I have so many good friends here who are winemakers and connected to the wine business. I feel, and I haven't been back for 3 years, which is partly because of the war, partly because whatever we got, there's COVID, and so. But I feel very connected to Israeli wine, even though, and here's what happened. Basically, we just had a lot of trouble. The cost of making wine here is not necessarily more than it is in the States, but I didn't have my own winery here, so I couldn't control my costs the way I can control them, with my own space, my own crew. There are just economies of scale that work really well when you control your winemaking space, and if you don't, every bottle costs you a lot. We just couldn't make enough profit, even though we sold a lot of our wine to the States. And then we finally, after about 6-7 years, people started to believe me when I said, I really believe in Israeli wine. And so we were doing very well in Tel Aviv in the restaurant scene here, secular restaurant scene. But then COVID came in, killed the restaurant scene. So we had like 2 years, no income whatsoever from Israel practically, and it was a challenge making and selling enough wine in America of our Israeli products. So we just, in 2021, I tearfully listened to my wife and my CFO here, and we realized we're just going to go way broker than we already are here in Israel, and we had to stop. And I didn't want to. I still don't want to. And if anybody listening to this podcast, very important here, this is the most important part of the podcast. If you know anybody with $7 to $10 million, I have a spot that's for sale. I know where it is, but I can't tell anybody. And I know where I want to build that winery that I never was able to raise enough money for here in Israel. So I'm still trying to do it. And I want to build my winery and plant my vineyard here in Israel.
So you still think there's potential for a world-class kosher wine from Israel?
When you're talking about potential,
okay,
come on, Simon.
I love it. No, I'm asking you.
Listen,
you've been in California. You've been in wine for almost all your life. I've tasted more wine and reviewed. I made so many people rich at the Wine Spectator. I know what good wine tastes like all over the world. In fact, not one winemaker on planet Earth has tasted and reviewed as much wine as I have. Okay, the masters of wine. I mean, they've also tasted a lot of wine, and I respect them for that. But I know what great wine tastes like. Yeah. Sometimes we make great wine too. And it has nothing to do with whether it's kosher or Israeli or whatever. It's like you get a good vineyard and you don't screw it up and you make awesome wine. So but the only thing missing from my equation here is that I didn't start with enough money. It's true what they say about the wine business. You make a small fortune, you start with a large fortune. Yeah. Well, I didn't start with a small fortune. I started with like a bank loan and in Israel and in America as well. We just couldn't make it work fiscally, but I haven't given up. I'm just kind of, let's talk about old Jews who made it late in life. Moshe, he started kind of late. There are others who got a late start. Akiva, he didn't start, like 46 when he got started? 40.
40, I don't know.
40 when he started.
I know. So we can do this. I just need the money because I'm not coming back without having enough money. It costs a lot of money to get started. There you go.
So you've worked closely with your wife, Jody.
Yeah.
co-authoring cookbooks,
10.
building
10
Covenant.
cookbooks.
10.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because that's what you got to do when you're not making enough money in the beginning selling the wine.
So what's the secret to that creative and marital partnership?
That's an excellent question that I will answer because Jody doesn't have a mic, even though she's in the room here listening.
You could wear mine. I don't mind.
I have a very, it's a good answer. So, you know, a lot of people say, oh, how can you work together? Well, I think what makes a great marriage is having shared vision, shared goals, and that could be your children, your family, having that shared vision. And I think for Jody and me, Jody and I didn't always work together, but after about a year or two of trying to run Covenant by myself, back in, say, 2004, 2005, I really need, Jody was a social worker, and she was a executive director for a food and wine organization in the States that was founded by Julia Child and Robert Mondavi. So she was very busy, but I said, honey, I need help. And she graciously agreed to, you know, stop doing her other things to help me run Covenant, which she has done, thank God, for the last almost 20 years. And it gives us a shared goal in life to make it work, to make it sing, to make it successful. And so, you know, we don't come home, we don't leave the house in the morning, go off to work, and then come back and say, well, how was your day, honey? We know how our day was because we lived it together. You know, she's got the big office at the winery. I have a smaller office. And that's...
You're out in the vineyards.
I'm out in the vineyards a lot. But so anyway, so it's great. I think that if you like your work, you like the vision, even though it's challenging, it's hard, I think the work has brought us closer together. And so I'm very grateful for that.
Your daughter Zoe has taken on a growing role at Covenant. What's it like to see the next generation step in?
Well, it's fantastic. I mean, Zoe is now the general manager at Covenant. And that's very important. She kind of, you know, keeps everything moving smoothly. She has to deal with personalities and logistics and all sorts of stuff. And she does a great job at that. She grew up in the wine business. She grew up in Napa Valley. She also speaks fluent Hebrew. She's Israeli, and she speaks by extension fluent Jewish. She gets our people, our customers, who come in various sizes, shapes, colors, and perspectives. And she's invaluable in terms of running Covenant, along with the other members of our team. But I hope that my kids, my other daughter is her sister Sky is in the restaurant business. She's the publicist for a small restaurant group called the French Laundry Restaurant Group, which is actually a very big restaurant group in America. So both of them are into food and wine, and I hope that they will continue to do so and maybe take Covenant to an even higher level, along with our fabulous crew, which includes the famous Jonathan Haydu, who's been making wine with me for 21 years, and who has his own brand, as you know, Haydu Wines, and Segi Kleinlehrer, who is our managing director, and he has his own brand now, which just became Kosher, Kleinlehrer.
Really?
Yeah, and both of them make their wines at Covenant, so that's kind of cool. And then we have just an awesome group in the cellar. Nomi Furman, who is our enologist. Dashel, what's Dashel's last name? What is it? Dashel Ferguson, who is the master of piping the right music into the cellar to work, and also who's a terrific, he's basically the cellar master. And then, of course, we're losing Nelly Sagiv, who has been with us for 3 years. 3 years? Yeah. Wow. This is Israel's gain and Covenant's loss. And anybody who needs a really great hands-on Shomer Shabbat cellar worker should not hesitate for a moment to hire Nelly Sagiv, who knows all my secrets and who will be here in July.
Okay.
He's moving back home to Israel. So what else?
So you recently returned to music with your band Free Run. I
Yeah.
love the name, by the way.
Yeah.
How was recommitting?
Yeah.
Okay, I love it.
My wife is just kibitzing here. She's reminding me that all of my best ideas come from Jody, including the name Free Run, which is a reference to the first wine that we let flow out of the tanks after fermentation. It's the best wine. It's not the press wine. It's the Free Run.
It's Free Run. How has that reconnecting with jazz influenced your day-to-day life as a winemaker?
Well, it hasn't. What it has is influenced my day-to-day life because then I have to practice every day. So
I thought it was a way you could let off steam.
well, it is you know what it is. It's kind of like covenant. What does covenant mean? Covenant is about a connection. Okay, connection to each other or us, God, religion, our heritage. All that stuff is about connection. Well, the saxophone I had not played for nearly 20, 25 years. I stopped playing because I got busy with wine, and during COVID, when I had time on my hands, I thought maybe I should start to play again. So. The horn reconnected me to something I loved and I had forgotten how much I loved. So we have incorporated some really interesting wine tastings into with the music. For example, 2 years ago, we did a concert with some of my old buddies who are super famous musicians now. And we did a concert at City Winery in New York where we did, in addition to the concert, we did 20 vintages. We poured 20 vintages, every vintage practically of Covenant.
Wow.
That was really cool. And we filled the room, 200 people. I don't think they came for my saxophone playing, but it's okay. I played pretty well. But they came for the wine, and that was a lot of fun. And
You gonna repeat it again?
maybe. I mean, it's not so easy to get a room at the City Winery. It's a pretty expensive venue. We also did a concert in Paris last year that was a lot of fun at a jazz club where I think they had some of our wines, which was good. And we have concert series at the winery where I just played one night about 2 weeks ago. I played a gig with my quartet, with the Free Run Quartet, and that was a lot of fun, drinking Covenant. So somehow we try to connect them, but I wouldn't say that the wine is it is somewhat of a spiritual pursuit. And just like the wine is, and it's an aesthetic pursuit, just like the wine is. So in that way, I would say they're related.
Okay. Any new directions or projects exciting you
Yeah.
at Covenant?
Twist my arm. Let me tell you about it.
Oh, please. I'd love it.
So, have you heard of the Black Label?
Yes, I have actually. I've heard only great things about
So
it.
the
Too.
Black Label. So, the Black Label is, for years, people have been asking me to make Mavushal wine. And we finally succumbed to the Mavushal requests, I don't know, maybe 7, 8 years ago. We were using something called flash détente, which is used by a lot of wineries in California, to heat the grapes before fermentation, and then you don't have to heat the wine. Okay, it's not very nice. Denatures the tannins a bit in the reds, but it was good enough. But that wasn't our top of the line wine. And our business partner, Jeff Rochwager, who lives in Bet Shemesh, by the way, and who took over after Leslie Rudd died and became our partner, and has basically been an extraordinary support for us in the 6 or 7 years since Leslie died. So Jeff is a wine lover, obviously, and he said, you got to make a high-end Mavushal. And I said, come on, Jeff. We're making Mashiach wine here. We want Mashiach. We want our best wines to be like not Mavushal, because that's what we're going to give to Mashiach. And Jeff said, well, there's a market for high-end Mavushal. Do you think you can do it? And I said, I can't do it with this flash détente. So I went back to the drawing board with Jonathan Haydu. And Jonathan, who's a really good tinkerer, inventor, he created a new Mavushalizer for us, a new Mavushalizing machine, which is just awesome. It's very small. It's only about, I don't know, maybe 3 feet, 4 feet long, and maybe 2 feet high. And we are able to push the wine through it, heat it super fast, and get it out of there, cool it down really fast. And we did an experiment with high-end Cabernet. And to my surprise, we discovered that this mavushalizer softens the tannins a little bit and heightens the fruit quality. So it actually makes a younger Cabernet taste pretty damn good.
You're the second winemaker who's told me that.
So,
Who's told me
yeah.
that.
So I was kind of surprised. And then,
Wow.
so then we also make Pinot Noir. But we make a Pinot Noir with our Landsman line, which is a club wine, which is not sold in retail shops. But I wanted to try it with Pinot anyway. So we used some of our Pinot and we mavushalized the Pinot. And we also noticed it was pretty good. So what are we gonna call it? Because I didn't want it to have the same label as the Covenant Regular, right? The Regular and the Mavushal, and the same label would be confusing. Yeah. So we decided we kept the logo, the Covenant logo. We kept the gold, but then I was thinking, what is like an immediate
eye catcher,
immediately recognizable as quality? And I'm thinking, well, there's Johnny Walker Black Label. Oh, it's going to be Covenant Black Label. And by the way, Covenant Black Label came out way before the Carmel Black Label. I'm sorry. I already saw that. But the good news is that my Black Label costs $100 more than Carmel's Black Label. So how about that, guys? Yeah. And our Black Label is at the top of the spectrum. And we have... last year, I lost a Petit Syrah vineyard that was going into most of which was going into our Red Sea blend. So I was looking around for another vineyard, and I found a vineyard right next to the Matanzas Creek Winery, which came out with the first $250 Merlot in California about 20 years ago. Very famous vineyard for Merlot. And this vineyard is right next to Matanzas Creek, and they didn't have a buyer. And I said, well, I'll take those grapes. We'll see what I didn't know what I was going to get out of it. The grapes are extraordinarily good. And we decided that they're so good that we're coming out with a Black Label Merlot.
Wow.
And we're bottling it in July. So we'll have the Black Label Pinot Noir, Black Label Merlot, and the Black Label Cabernet.
Wow.
And none of it is Napa anymore. But it's just awesome quality. Very, very fine vineyards from Sonoma. All of them are from Sonoma. And I'm really excited about this. Now, we're still making our flagship Napa Not Mavushal Cabernet and the Solomon, which is our even more expensive. And I'm proud of those as well. But I'm really happy that the diners in kosher restaurants and also at Simchas, where they actually want to spend real money on real wine, have our Black Label available. And then we have we have a bubbly that's also a mavushal, and that's our okay. So
which one?
I'm getting prompts here. So
they're allowed. That's why she's here.
Well, you think I was going to forget about this? Yeah. So that's the next project is very exciting. By the way, we didn't talk about our brandy, which is the double-edged sword brandy, which we started making about 4 or 5 years ago. Okay, it's pretty expensive, but it's way better than the crappy cognac that I see a lot of people drinking that's artificially colored, not made with good grapes, and just not worthy. At $350 a bottle, thank you very much, I'll pass. But our wine, the double-edged sword, very simply made, Chenin Blanc, distilled, aged 2 years in Covenant barrels, tastes pretty damn good. And I defy anybody to tell me it's not better than your overpriced cognacs that people are buying because they think cognac is good. So the double-edged sword is, $175 in the States. And yeah, you're not going to drink a lot of it. It's a lot of money to pay.
That's my go-to during Pesach.
Yeah, well, that's right. Listen, I drink a lot of scotch too. Okay,
I drink a lot of scotch, but Pesach, I'm a cognac guy.
Yeah, we were at a Pesach. We were at a Pesach week at a resort in Cancun this year, and they just drink that stuff like it's water.
Right.
It's good. It's very smooth. But anyway, the next newest exciting project is just starting to come to fruition because we spent the last 8 months trying to get the licensing for it. And it's our Woodacre Spirits program. That is a joint venture with the great Jonathan Haydu and Covenant Winery.
Yeah.
So we're partners in this. And Jonathan is, he loves distillation. He loves to distill things. And so...
Is it vermouth or something?
No. He makes a vermouth, but maybe we'll make a vermouth, a dry vermouth. He makes a sweet vermouth, which is not appropriate for this.
Right.
But so we're coming out with gin. Everything we'll make will be kosher Pesach, except the whiskey that we're going to do also. So the gin and the vodka we're going to do in-house. And the gin is made with herbs and botanicals that we harvest ourselves in the hills of the town of Woodacre, which is in the mountains just before you get to the Pacific Ocean, in the village of Woodacre. And so we've decided to call this brand Woodacre. And it's really good. And we're going to also eventually come out with a most likely Kentucky bourbon that will be aging in Covenant barrels. We'll have to source it out of Kentucky. And eventually we'll get to the mezcal also. So we'll have 4 new spirits. They will not be stupid expensive, but they'll be, very affordable. So
yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So that's going to happen soon.
Talking along those lines, are there any varietals or styles that you've always wanted to experiment with but haven't been able to?
Well, how about the ones that I've been experimenting with that I'm crazy about, like the Vineyard that we made in Israel?
The Vineyard is.
And so when we stopped making wine in Israel, I thought, I gotta make Vineyard, and I found a really great small Vineyard vineyard in Lodi, California. Wow. And so we're on our
next to the Zinfandel.
Yeah, well, it's near the Zinfandel, and we started with 150 cases. That sold out immediately. And then we went to 300 cases. That sold out way fast. Last year we did 450 cases. I don't know if I'm going to grow it much more, but there's a market for our barrel fermented Viogniers that I think are quite good. I also, what else do I want to, what else is unusual that we do? I love Chenin Blanc, and we made some extraordinary Chenin Blanc.
One of my favorites.
For our double-edged sword spirits program. But the problem was, it was so good that he didn't want to distill it all. So he kept some back, and we bottled it, and I couldn't sell it. Nobody wanted it. So I drank most of it myself. It was fantastic.
Wow.
I don't know what's wrong with it. Anyway, I'm not ready to start up with Chenin, but I love Chenin. And maybe
I love it as well.
Yeah. So I don't know.
It's becoming popular here now.
Yeah, I know. Well, the Chenin, I told you, I had Amichai Lori's Chenin Blanc on the plane coming over here. That was from Shiloh. It was fantastic.
I had it with him about half a week ago. Yeah. Are there any of your wines that you don't feel get enough correct attention from consumers?
That's a good question. I think that Syrah is still not getting the respect it deserves, although we make 3 Syrahs and they all sell pretty well. Yeah. But when confronted with an $80 Syrah and a $120 Cabernet, most people will go for the Cabernet. Yeah. And I look at them and I say, what's wrong with this picture? Syrah is an extraordinary grape. Some of the greatest red wines in the world are made from Syrah. In Israel, which is, I think it's the superior red grape in Israel. Mm-hmm. Don't talk to me about Argamon. It's very nice, but it doesn't even come close.
Just be patient. Everything takes time. No. I know what you're saying.
It's very nice.
No.
But it's like,
get it.
Okay.
I hear you. Yeah. I hear you 100%. So
maybe they're right. Wine is definitely made in the winery and not in the vineyard. Let's remember that.
That's a question I normally ask.
Yeah. Well, it's totally made in the winery because you can have really great grapes come out of a vineyard, and one yucky winemaker screws it up, and the other does a great job with it. So where was that wine? Where did it achieve its potential? In the winery. Now, it's very hard to make a great wine from mediocre grapes. I'll give you that, but that's obvious.
Right.
But it's made in the winery, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. But it's nice to start with really good quality grapes. I'll give you that. And the Argamon, it's nothing. I don't think Argamon is a good grape. It's a very good grape.
No, it's. I'm not saying that.
Yeah, I just haven't had any
that was that move the needle at all,
Yeah,
beyond
it's kinda
just
like
being beautiful color.
It's like Zinfandel. I like Zinfandel, but I don't think Zinfandel can ever achieve the same greatness as Syrah or Cabernet. I mean, we make Zinfandel. It's my go-to least expensive wine. It's easy to drink. It's lovely, but all right.
Any updated feelings about Mavushal?
Well,
That you talked about.
Yeah, the great surprise is that I'm
Yeah.
like, no, we make 20 wines at Covenant.
Wow.
Yeah,
Didn't
20.
realize that.
Yeah. And 6 or 7 of them are still sold here in Israel. I think I don't have any Mavushal wine here, but I think it's coming. We make a really nice, less expensive Cabernet called the Tribe.
Yeah, sure.
Tribe Cabernet is very nice, and we make a Tribe Chardonnay that I think is like really fantastic. It reminds me of really good Chablis from France, both Mavushal wines, and they're $35 wines in the States. So they are quite affordable. But just because I think we can Mavushalize successfully, my basic wine philosophy is not interventionist.
Right.
So we don't add any yeast. We don't add anything really.
You don't add yeast?
Why would I add yeast?
I'm asking.
No, I wouldn't. I'm not adding yeast. Actually, I was just harassing you there. We don't add yeast because I'm not a chicken shit winemaker.
Okay.
Okay? It's very simple.
Okay.
Okay? You know, when I started, I was using yeast, commercial kosher yeast, because I was terrified of like stuck ferments or whatever. And in 2008, my friend and mentor, David Ramey, who was a pioneer of indigenous yeast winemaking in California, and who taught me how to make wine, basically, said to me, Jeff, how come you're not using native yeast? Really try it. It's a slower ferment, and it gives you, I think, more complexity. You can buy yeast that's going to give you more bananas or more apples or more red fruit or more, whatever. It's going to go faster. It's going to go slower because all these yeasts have been developed in laboratories to do certain things. Or you can use yeast from Hashem, which basically native yeast comes in from the vineyards, it's on the skins, maybe it's overwintering in the winery. I don't know. We don't know where it comes from, but it works really well. So in 2008, I started, and I haven't used the...
Look back.
I haven't looked back. Everything we do is native yeast.
So I want to tell you something. The comments I get from people, that I hear from people about your wines, are definitely showing an increase of complexity. So maybe that's what's been decided.
We ferment. We have changed our winemaking protocols over the years. So in addition to native yeast, I've started fermenting at cooler temperatures than I used to. I used to let it go a little warmer, and then at the end I would raise the temperature in my tanks and give it to try to get more extraction. And then I decided I don't like that extraction. I like something that's more elegant and perhaps more complex. And so we keep it around 78, 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So I find you get a slower ferment, you get the native yeast, and you get more levels of complexity. I don't have some like menu that I follow, or I don't really know why it comes out tasting good almost all the time. I don't know why. I learned how to make wine from David Ramey and another guy named Michel Roland.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, slightly famous person.
Yeah, and these guys were very generous and shared their so-called secrets with me. And not secrets really, but their techniques. And it's, if you get good grapes and you just let it happen, and you can control the temperature of your ferment, native yeast, you can make some pretty good wine. So, not too much oak. I don't like to have too much new oak, except a few of our, like my Syrah is like 75% new oak, and a Solomon can be 75% new oak, but typically it's 20 to 30% new oak, if that much. Red Sea has no new oak.
Okay. You've worn many hats: musician, author, editor, winemaker. What do you consider your greatest legacy?
Well, I do think, and it was not necessarily intentional, but I do think that I, along with a number of my colleagues, like Eli Ben-Zaken, we have raised the bar for kosher wine. And we have given our our wines more respect throughout the world, in both the Jewish world and the secular world. And that means a lot to me. I mean, we invented, psychology, the atomic bomb, physics, you name it. We invented everything, right? Why should we get less respect for our wines, which basically are part of our heritage and our religious practice? So, like I said, that wasn't necessarily my goal, okay? I just want to make a really great kosher wine, but looking back, I think it's a shared legacy. I share this legacy with many of my colleagues who have also raised the bar here.
So you mentioned a little bit, but I just want to ask you one last question.
Yeah.
Future dreams, what do you still hope to achieve?
Well, aside from building that winery and planting that vineyard
that's
here
a
in
huge
Israel,
dream.
that's a dream. It's I'm not getting younger, so anybody with the money, let's talk.
Yeah.
I know what to do. I just need capital. And
you even know where.
I know where. I know how to do it. Yeah, I know this stuff. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time now. Future dreams, well, I'd like to work a little less, but I don't ever want to stop. So I would like to manage my team in California, a little less hands-on, a little more intellectually, and I would like to have time to manage a new team in Israel.
Very cool. I can't wait till you come back. And I'm not wishing you bad by that. I'm wishing you only good. I was so excited when we talked in the restaurant, you, Jay, and I, and you took out this bottle with the map of Israel on it, and I just freaked out.
I think that was one of the more fun moments of my life, because you were sitting there, and Jay wanted to introduce us, Jay Buxbaum of Royal Wine fame.
Right.
And we're sitting in this restaurant, and Jay had been talking to me about you. This is, 12, 13, 14 years ago.
Yeah.
And he said, I want you to meet this guy, Simon Jacob, but he only will drink Israeli wine. And I said, well, Jay, I got something to show him. You know this. And so we sat down, and you were one of the first people to see this.
Yeah. That's I have a bottle of the 13 from you.
It's pretty good.
Time. Yeah, it's still amazing. It's great.
I don't, why do these wines last so long? I don't know. You make them and you bottle them when they're stable and they've been in barrel long enough. And this is unfiltered, unfiltered, unfined. What can I say?
Thank you very much for being on the Kosher Terroir, and especially allowing me to take over your dining room to record. So I can't wait till you come back again.
Well, Simon,
I really look forward.
Thank you for having me on the show, being such a great supporter of Covenant, and I love your enthusiasm for all of the wines in Israel and all of our winemaker friends. You are really we need people like you to help carry this message to the public.
Please,
so thank you.
Please, God. Thank you very much. This is Simon Jacob again, your host of today's episode of the Kosher Terroir. I have a personal request. No matter where you are or where you live, please take a moment to pray for our soldiers' safety and the safe and rapid return of our hostages. Please subscribe via your podcast provider to be informed of our new episodes as they are released. If you're new to the Kosher Terroir, please check out our many past episodes.